how close do you believe the Mountain West was to not existing after all of this poaching and all of this stuff that's gone on with the Pac-12? Was that an actual reality?
Yeah, there was definitely a couple days there in the middle as schools were announcing their departure that we didn't know what the future held and what it looked like. But what happened rather quickly was the remaining 7 schools really came together and said, "Hey, we want to make this thing work." So it went from what are we going to be to pretty quickly we're going to survive.
Well, and I think that's another thing, and we've talked about this on the show at length. You talk about surviving. Nobody's in the business for survival, and I think that's one of the hardest things here. And directly, I would ask you, when you look at where you are with the Pac-12, when you go back to the beginning of this process, take me through did your phone ring, and was it the Pac-12? Was it Teresa Gould saying, "Hey, we'd like to do a scheduling agreement"? Like, how did this whole scheduling agreement situation come to fruition?
That was me working with the 2 schools directly because at that point, George Kliavikoff was still the commissioner, although he wasn't very active in working with Oregon State and Washington State. And so that was me directly with those 2 athletic directors' schools. Then the renewal, that's by then Teresa had been hired and we were working with her directly and couldn't come to an agreement. And then everything happened.
Everything happened.
Commissioner, do you feel right now with where the conference is at, do you feel like you guys are in a strong place moving forward? Like, obviously there's been so much about the negotiations and the relationship with the Pac-12. Do you feel right now that the Mountain West is in a strong place to go out and get a TV deal, or where do you feel you guys are at with that process currently?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I had just done an around the room last week with our athletic directors, and they felt really good. We have certainty. We have membership. We're talking to our television partners right now. We will have a media deal. And, the ones that are joining us are really excited. And they're, the halo effect of becoming Mountain West members has really excited their bases. And they're committed to coming in and making an impact.
And listen, it's okay if you want to break some news on the show, and if you want to, how close are you? How confident? And obviously, you're going to say, "Hey, we're really confident. We feel great," and I totally get that. But we have talked to many people in the media, and I will tell you this directly: you are, whether you understand this or not, you're very well liked. You're very well respected. And one of the things that really stands out to me as we talk to people in television is when you call them, it's not like people are like, oh, great. What are we getting into here? So the question I would ask you is, A, how is your relationship with your TV partners from your perspective? And B, how close do you actually think you are to getting a new media rights deal for the Mountain West Conference?
Yeah. So, we've had long-term partnerships with CBS and Fox at the Mountain West. And of course, I've been in this business for 30 years. So of course, it's a small world when it comes to that. We've known each other for decades. So we do have very strong relationships with those 2, and we are working with them on what a new media would look like. I am very, very confident, 100% confident. We will have a media deal. When it will be finalized and what it will be, that's still in the works. And, these things take time, and we're ahead of schedule. So while we're moving with urgency, I don't think we have a rush to hit a deadline.
But I also think you're in, maybe race is the wrong way to put it. You're in competition because one of the things that I think is very interesting about where you find yourself right now is there enough money for 2 deals with the Pac-12 and the Mountain West? And again, not survival, because I don't know that anybody just wants to survive. Can the Mountain West and the Pac-12 both get deals that allow you both to survive and to thrive in the same marketplace?
Yes, I believe so. Because, the deals, part of it is financial, certainly, but also it's exposure and getting your games and products out there to a wide audience that then also increases value. So I do feel there is money out there, certainly because we're competing against each other and there's 2 different packages of inventory in the market, I think we're pulling each other down to some degree because there's competition. But I don't think it's mutually exclusive.
Well, I think that's the right way to say it. I don't know that there's not multiple TV deals, but I think the other part of this landscape is it's not like there's a ton of availability in after dark windows, if you will, in the windows where you want your prime time game to be played, your best game of the week. How much inventory is there out there, and is that a concern for you?
The inventory, again, the volume of inventory hasn't changed. It's just changed conference alignment and the negotiating parties. So it's still very valuable inventory. And, again, I think there's enough to go around, but, new look media deals, it's not go to one partner, take all our inventory, and then get a second partner. It's really, all right, partner, what do you want? What are you looking for this round? And how can we work together to craft that? And many conferences have multiple partners. It's, usually couple linear, some digital, that type of thing. So it'll be an exercise in, getting creative and bringing new partners to the table, perhaps, and figuring out how to get our inventory the best possible reach.
And to that point, with trying to be creative, do you value streaming at a high level? I know that there's been a lot of conversations with the Pac-12 in the past before they got to their current situation about how much their deal was going to be streaming versus linear. For you as the commissioner of the Mountain West, is streaming a really valuable piece, or do you think linear is much more of where you guys need to be?
I do think streaming is very valuable. In fact, we have everything that's not picked up by linear partners is free to the public on the Mountain West network. So we still have our own collegiate network that streams at a very high level. Some of our product, especially football and men's and women's basketball games, linear still is where you find the most reach. And when you partner with folks like CBS, who also have the basketball tournament, the NCAA March Madness, there's a real marketing pump and lift you get with being affiliated with those types of partners.
Yeah, and I think you look at your TNT deal. I think that is very fascinating because obviously TNT in that family. And I also would love to hear you talk about basketball a little bit here, because we have heard repeatedly how important basketball revenue is. And listen, I know we're all about football and football money, and how important would you say to you as a commissioner, when you look at your books and you look at the financial picture, how important is basketball money to the lifeblood of the Mountain West?
The money is real. It's significant, but it's also how we identify ourselves. We've always been a very deep basketball conference, multi-bid. The media partners tend to value basketball at 20% of the total media pie. So if you're looking for a percentage, that's the one commonly used by media partners.
Yeah, and I think the reason I ask you that obviously is with this new grant of rights and the statement you released. We've seen the grant of rights now. We've seen the memo of understanding. Obviously, Las Vegas is a critical part of your infrastructure now and your footprint. You guys have committed to moving there. So take me through the importance of UNLV in your conference, because we've heard so much about how the Pac-12 is hunting for UNLV and they're trying to make that happen. And firstly, why did you release that statement when it came a couple of weeks ago? And how important is UNLV and how important is the Las Vegas market to the Mountain West Conference?
The statement, I would say the target audience for that was just as much internal as external. I think our members were like, is it true? What's happening? And we had just completed signing the full form, the long form grant of rights. And I think there were a lot of folks surmising, guessing, thinking about what the Pac-12 might do next based on the fact that we had an MOU. So it was important to tell not only our current members, but our incoming members and kind of, the media at large, that this is where we were at today. And the long form is the one that the ACC and the Big 12 use. It's been tested in the courts and withstood legal scrutiny. So, it was just important, I think, to get that out there, that it was signed and all have committed. I forgot the second part
Las
of your question.
Vegas. How important is UNLV in Las Vegas? And we're totally okay. Two-part questions are horrendous to begin with, but how important is UNLV in Las Vegas to the Mountain West?
Yes, as you could see, vary for what they are and what they've achieved and how they've been competing lately in Las Vegas, and the investment of being a sports capital is huge. And the Mountain West was the original disruptor 25 years ago, when schools broke away and formed the league. We've had schools like Utah, BYU, TCU, and certainly, we always have that next generation coming up and becoming very nationally relevant. UNLV is already there, and having them in the league is really important. But I do expect that we're going to have teams 2, 3, 4, and 5, just like we always do.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things about that is being a developmental league, and feeder is probably strong, but it seems like the Mountain West always has this history of losing teams. And I think it's so interesting. Here we sit in Salt Lake City. Utah is the original BCS buster. The Holy War was born in the Mountain West. You think about the history of this conference, and you look at UNLV. So then I go back to how prominent UNLV is in your conference. And I say, how do you now stop this from happening? And you look at these lawsuits and you look at this situation you find yourself in. At what point does the Mountain West stop having to defend its flanks and start growing and start becoming more prominent as a conference on the whole?
Yeah. And, you said losing, but we are that league, from the presidents to the athletic directors to coaches to student athletes. When you're in the middle of an ecosystem, it's natural for those that are really successful in your environment to look to the next step. And we applaud that. We promote that. That's who we are. Many come back in a different capacity, coaches, former student athlete, that type of thing. And so it really is part of our DNA. And so perhaps it's never to stop growing, but that the Mountain West growth looks a lot like constantly reshaping itself.
Yeah, but the problem with that is, here we are talking about not one lawsuit, multiple lawsuits, and you're in a position now, and maybe I shouldn't speak for you, but ask you, did the Pac-12 put you guys in a position? Because I feel like, and I've been told that you guys extended an olive branch, that you guys were trying to be a solution, and now you find yourself in court on multiple fronts. Like, I feel like this poaching thing, if that's the right word, I feel like this poaching thing can't go on forever. How do you stop that? How do you stop? Does this grant of rights, does that stop the UNLV to the Pac-12 conversation?
I don't think any conversation stopped because it's the topic of the day. But I will say the scheduling agreement was new territory, right? It's something that hadn't been done before, but certainly thankful for the opportunity to have that agreement, have the exchange of value that included protecting us in the future, because it was always kind of a known threat, so to speak. And they were very clear about what they wanted to do and wanted to be, and we knew we were right there in the target. So
do you regret it? Do you regret taking that step? Do you regret having those conversations with the Pac-12?
Not at all, because without that scheduling agreement, we wouldn't have the protections that we had that helped keep the league together.
Boy, that's a heck of a perspective. I give you a lot of credit for that, because it would have been easy right there to say, yeah, I regret it. I wish we hadn't done it. But you didn't do that. And before I ask you about a broader question about the college football playoff, are you open to settlements? Because I think one of the things that's very interesting to me and to a lot of our viewership is, how do we go from where we are now with the Mountain West? How do you take that next step forward? Are you opening to settling poaching agreements and exit fees? Is that something that you guys have talked about?
Well, it's not just my decision. I am working on behalf of the board. So whatever we do, I would have to bring forward to the board. And honestly, I think we're open to all solutions. We always have been.
So you would be open to, would you be open to a merger? Because obviously let's, all cards out. You guys are massive litigation with them right now. It's not like you guys are, hey, Terry, it's me. Good to talk. Like, it's not like there's an open, fun conversation. So is a merger something that you and your constituents would talk about?
I think we're open to everything. We've not foreclosed any options at this point, and that's kind of the business strategy you have to adopt in this environment because no one knows what's happening out there. I mean, we still have the House settlement that needs to come to finalization. We still have a lot of open questions on NIL. Media deals are being negotiated. So it would be not very prudent at this point to take anything off the table, frankly.
Well, and I think the last question I'll have for you, and thank you again for coming on the show. I know this is, an interesting time for you at a conference level, but let's talk about the national picture because we're getting this week meetings between the SEC and the Big Ten. You have been very vocal about the position that your conference is in, and you came out very strongly in when everybody was criticizing, let's say, Boise State for the bye. And how does a G5 survive, the Mountain West in particular, when you have people like Greg Sankey in the Big Ten and that whole group meeting without you sitting at the table? How do you thrive and survive in this environment?
Well, and remember, all the decisions are made in the CFP structure, and certainly there's weighted voting toward the power two. But we all come to the table and discuss these things. Certainly we could be outvoted. Maybe we align on some things, but that's where we have a voice in the room. And when you talk about what we are in the ecosystem, as we discussed previously, we are a really important source of talent, frankly. Schools, presidents, ADs, coaches, student athletes, and we're in a very important and productive and meaningful part of the FBS football environment.
But are you not to go back to feeder system, but we were talking before the show, Ashton Ginty had choices. Now, obviously he stayed in the conference, but it seems like you're in a position where you have all this talent. And I agree with you. I look at a guy, look at Scott Barnes. Look at Scott Barnes, who I think is a fantastic administrator, who was at Utah State and is at Oregon. Like, I don't know how you continue with that because I feel like we're talking about a lot of money. Do you think all of your member institutions are up for revenue sharing we're starting at $20.5 million? Is that an environment where all of your membership can thrive?
Well, by the way, we've not been competing on an equal playing field with them today before all this. But yet we still manage to field very competitive teams. And as long as we have access to the CFP, top 5 conference champions get a berth, then we are relevant and we can still recruit and compete and be in the ecosystem. Are we in for revenue sharing? Absolutely. Are we doing 20 million per school? No. But we've never been tit for tat with those guys, but we always seem to compete. We do us well. We find the diamond in the rough and create great administrators, great coaches, great student athletes.
Sure. Real quick, last question, because you've been great with your time. Thank you again. Should the college football playoff be expanded?
I'm open to hearing that discussion. I came out and said I didn't think we should change it after year one. I still feel that way. I thought it was a very successful year one. I thought the on-campus games were great. I thought the ratings were great. But I think all things positive. Why not talk about expansion? I'm not quite sure what that looks like yet, but definitely open to the conversation.